To your understanding, what do you think is the cause of that?
England was. They didn't do as much as they did on the continent.
Here in Ireland, we don't call it a famine. It's genocide by the English. They were moving stuff out. Me and my brother here, we were from Cove, and that's a place where they commemorate where the cattle were put onto ships and shipped out to England, and all the wheat, and the Irish would be put outside fences, starving, and reaching for the food and everything. So it was well known in Ireland that this was complete robbery, and in the English Parliament as well, they've documents have come to light now because of the time, and they actually talked about it in Parliament, sort of saying, "Oh, it looks like we're only going to get about 1 million of them. We're aiming for wiping out the whole lot of them." So it's not a famine at all.
I would assume the British really taxed the Irish, not taxed money-wise, but taxed them, and they just they became slaves of the British, and the British pretty much took over, and thus they couldn't afford everything that you think they could afford, so thus they ended up starving to death.
And my aunt tells me that my great-grandmother, she had some brothers, and one of them went over to go retrieve the farm because the British were taking over all the property, and nobody ever heard from them again, so we don't know.
Well, we have come a long way since the Irish Famine, really. Do you know what I mean? But as I said, I feel then people used to eat a lot less, dishes were smaller, plates were smaller,
So we were told essentially, like, it's kind of unbelievable now, but that the population lived off one crop, and there was a disease on that crop, potato blight, and because of that, people didn't have food to eat, which is surprising for a country that's surrounded by water. It's a small island, and we're led to believe that caused the famine, even though we're surrounded by fish and other things. But that's the line that we were told. So obviously there's more to it, and the more to it piece is that it was an exercise to get the tenants off the land. So we were a tenant-based farming country oversaw by an external power, the British Empire, and that's probably really what caused the famine.
So Ireland lagged behind because of not participating in the Industrial Revolution, and it's a different religion, lifestyle, agricultural based, and was victimized, is a fair word, by the English landlord system.
I have some recollection that there was some component of the Irish potato famine that was a result of, though I certainly recognize I could be wrong on this, of English policies, and the way in which Ireland has always been subordinated to England. So I'm assuming, like many environmental catastrophes, which I think this would count as, there's an environmental component, but there's also a human component or a governmental component.
The mismanagement of these crops was caused by the demand by the British for this new crop. The fact that the yields in Ireland have been very productive, and what was going wrong was that the Irish were making money. Not the Irish workers, but the English who were running these farms were making so much money that they neglected, to the point of fatality, the Irish people in that region. And in that sense, what they're guilty of, I would call a crime against humanity.
I think just that contention that that they were forced to land and stay on their land, and they couldn't develop their land. They couldn't make their land better. And also there's the portion of it where they felt like they were, as Catholics, they were persecuted. So I think they felt oppressed, and they couldn't come out of that oppressive to make things better for themselves.
就是他们并不把它看成是政府要怎么去做这件事情， 而是说政府主导之下，依靠的是爱尔兰的地主、爱尔兰的土地主他们的联盟，各个地方的地主有好多几百个，这样的联盟去发挥重要的作用。那联盟大家的诉求是很不一样的，有的是管自己的，他并不是说我考虑灾民啊或者怎么样要积极的去救，有的当然也有很好的人，把家里面的这个很多的粮食拿出来祭赈这个灾民。
In Boston, which is where we're originally from, it was made up of Italians and Irish, period.
And Jewish.
And Jewish. But the Irish came over and like the Italians, they built the city, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
They also ran the city, the Irish, but at least the Italians built the city. That's where my grandfather on my mother's side came from.
Why do you think the Irish migrate so much to the United States or to like...
Famine.
Well, there was something about the potato famine.
Yeah,
You know. I know my great-grandmother, she came over and she was a maid. And then that's where she met my great-grandfather.
So, have you heard about the Irish Famine or the Great Hunger?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sad part as far as I can see in the Irish history. I heard about emigration, and from a former visit I remember a statue of a coffin ship, and when I heard the story about the coffin ships, goosebumps were running all over my body. It's unbelievable.
My grandparents came over from Ireland back in 1860s, and I don't know.
What county?
Well, my father's family was from County Cavan, and my mother's family was from County Cork. She was a McGillicuddy, which pretty much gets Irish from there. And you're
my maiden
Kennedy.
name is Kennedy, but I have not looked up any of the family history.
Well, it had a huge impact on it, the fact that that people, the indigenous people, were thrown off the land, so they had no means to live, so to survive. So it had a huge impact, and it unsettled. It has still to this day, I think, that it has, especially for the countryside people who work and live and grow up in a country rural background in this country, still has a huge impact. Obviously, it had a huge impact. Millions of people left a small country. We were led to believe that the population declined by 50%, either through starvation or mass immigration. So it had a huge cultural impact. That could have been avoided.
Well, I think it made them more determined to get their own independence. They did,
Even though it was set in, the famine ended probably 30 years before the beginning of the history that I know, it was still, the reason for their immigration to the United States was because of the famine, because they were part of people who the British moved to infertile land. Ballyhonus really was limited in what they can do with their farming. It was basically, cattle and grazing, and there really was no produce. It was potatoes and turnips and parsnips. It was root vegetables that they can grow and nothing else really.